Kia ora, ki runa e te taumata timata kororo na mea katoa. Me wehi kei te aita. Hei manaki, kei tēnei reo korona ko Andrew Bailey aho no Wanganui aho. Hey, first of all, welcome, and it is fabulous to be with you tonight. Thank you for inviting me. I just want to acknowledge some people down here on the table, on the top table it sounds like. Mr. Rob Flanagan, Chair, Hayley Stroud, who's the acting CEO, Kirk Hope, who's going to be the new CEO, aren't you, Kirk? Hopefully. Also, people from the FMA, Craig Stobo, who's the Chair, and Samantha Barris, who's the CEO, who you've heard from today, and also our good friends Carl and the team from PwC. Hey, look, it's absolutely lovely to be with you today, tonight. I've met many people today on the course of my travels who have said they're either coming tonight or had been here earlier today. So it is obviously a very big event. And thank you for the Finance Services Council for putting on this event and bringing me here to speak. Now, the financial services sector is crucial for the function of our economy and for everyday lives of New Zealanders. Insurers help families navigate the hardest moments in their lives. Lenders give people access to the finance they need, when they need it, to buy a house or build a business. And fund managers prepare Kiwis for retirement and beyond. Financial services are integral to our everyday life. That's why it's so important that we get things right for the industry, and that's why I've spent so much time recently focusing on how we can improve outcomes in this space. As you're no doubt aware, early this year we began a process to reform financial services regulation in New Zealand. I'm happy to announce that since then we've made steady progress towards a simpler and more effective regulatory landscape. Here comes the meal. I better not be too long. Anyway, feel free to eat. The reason for this is that regulation of financial services is so important. It helps provide clarity and certainty for business, protection and transparency for customers and consumers, and when working well, leads to more innovation and better outcomes for all. But after so many years of successive changes, the landscape in New Zealand has become unnecessarily complicated, with layers and layers of regulation and legislation, and a lack of clarification of rules and obligations. That's why intervention is necessary. In March, I announced that the government's intention to simplify this complex web. We also announced that we would be tackling the project in two phases. In phase one, we announced that responsibility for the regulation of consumer credit would be transferred from the Commerce Commission to the Financial Markets Authority. We also revoked 11 pages of overly prescriptive regulations and aligned the rules for financial dispute resolution schemes. These changes immediately made the regulatory landscape more straightforward. They also make it easier for businesses and customers to get things done. We're now in stage 2 of these reforms. This phase began early this year when we released 3 discussion documents, each of which set out a plan for changing financial services regulation as it related to a particular area. Namely, 1, consumer credit, 2, conduct regulation, and 3, dispute resolution. Many of you in this room will have given feedback on these documents, and I thank you for doing so. I was clear from the beginning of this process that I wanted the reform package to respond to the needs of industry. Having gone through all the feedback, it is obvious that there are several common pain points, and we've identified straightforward, common-sense fixes for these. Happily, I'm here tonight to announce that following your feedback, Cabinet has agreed to make several changes which will help simplify and streamline financial services regulation. These changes should be viewed as a package following your feedback. Cabinet has agreed to make several changes which will, first of all, deal with for the need for clear rules and regulations and responsibilities. Then we need appropriate regulatory tools to enforce the rules. And finally, we need strong dispute resolution services so there is a backup when things go wrong and bad lending needs to be held to account. Our government is clear-eyed about the fact that access to finance is a fact of life. So these reforms are all about making it simpler to access finance, but also simpler to enforce rules and drive good lending practices. On consumer credit regulation, Cabinet has agreed to a suite of changes, including 3 pillars. The first is we will be transitioning consumer lending to a licensing model at no cost. This will bring consumer lending in line with other entities regulated by the FMA and will reduce costs as lenders will hold a licence indefinitely without having to reapply every 5 years. Second, we will be removing the due diligence duty and the associated personal liabilities for directors and senior managers. Whilst it is totally appropriate that lenders should be accountable for poor lending practices, extending these requirements at a personal level goes too far. Partly due to the decision to introduce a licensing framework, Cabinet has agreed that these are no longer appropriate, and I expect the change will lead to less overly conservative lending practices. Third, we will switch the burden of consequences for lenders who fail to make certain disclosures. You will be aware that certain financial institutions have been subject to class actions in respect of disclosures, and in some cases, these are largely of a technical nature and unlikely to have resulted in financial loss to the borrower. We wish to change the onus on the lender to prove the consumer was not harmed to the onus being on the consumer to show that they were. This will reduce administration burden for lenders, lead to more common sense decisions, and reduce the number of instances where lenders are punished despite a lack of harm. These 3 changes signify a significant shift in consumer credit regulation away from a prescriptive and restricting landscape of old towards a more proportionate, risk-based approach. In addition to these changes, the government has also agreed to streamline conduct regulation. Some of the decisions include, first of all minimum requirement for fair conduct programs will be simplified. This will be to ensure that they are fit for purpose and can be tailored to account for the nature of the business at hand. The FMA will streamline the licensing model so that providers of multiple market services only need to hold 1 licence, and the FMA will be given new powers. This includes the power to rely on assessments already made by the Reserve Bank where appropriate in order to reduce duplication. These could be assessments on cybersecurity or the fitness of senior managers. For example, it also includes the power to review a change in control before change occurs. The FMA will also be able to make on-site inspections without notice as a last resort. To be clear, this power will only be available once all other avenues have been tried and is only intended to be used in extreme cases. Finally, on dispute resolution services, we will be making changes to improve experiences for customers. We propose changing the review function to ensure that it is undertaken by an independent party and that resolution services performance will be measured against meaningful KPIs or targets. I'm also separately working with the industry to investigate establishing a single portal for disputes. Right now, many New Zealanders don't know where to go to get help when they have been a victim of poor lending practices. A single front door for the various services will simplify this process and improve awareness. Those are the big decisions announced by or agreed by Cabinet, but there are several others, smaller decisions, which I'll be releasing tomorrow. The key takeaway is that this government is committed to reducing red tape and regulatory burden to make it easier for households and businesses to access finance when they need it, and to rebuild the economy, we need people to be able to simply, safely and efficiently access money. I'm also excited about to be delivering on my promise to simplify regulation, and I hope the industry agrees that this should create a clear path forward for innovation, collaboration and growth. But the financial services reform package is not the only piece of work I have underway. I also want to briefly talk about some of my other portfolio priorities to give you a sense of the other things that are coming down the pipeline. As we have said repeatedly, this government is committed to getting the economy back on track. To do this, We will need well-functioning capital markets which allow the New Zealand businesses to access capital they need to grow. That is why another of my focus this year will be on taking action to deepen and diversify our capital markets. We have two key issues with our markets. First of all, an underperforming stock exchange, and secondly, insufficient investment going into great New Zealand businesses. On the first issue, I'm keen to promote more listings on the stock exchange by reducing unnecessary compliance costs. I expect to make an announcement on this before the end of the year. On the second issue of improving access to finance for great New Zealand businesses, I'm keen to better leverage funds held by Kiwis. Right now, there's a reluctance to invest in unlisted assets. For example, of the roughly 110 billion held by Kiwis providers, only about 2 or 3% is invested in private assets. By comparison, around 16% of Australia's 3.6 trillion pension fund industry is invested in private assets. My objective is to remove any impediments that restrict KiwiSaver funds from investing in great New Zealand businesses. On the other side of the coin, to improve greater access to finance is to open up access to the banks and banking services in general. You would have seen the final recommendations from the Commerce Commission into the banking market. Minister Willis and I have said that we will implement all 14 of the recommendations, but the specific area of focus for me is open banking. To this end, we have introduced the Consumer and Product Data Bill into Parliament. Competition and innovation is crucial and critical to a healthy and well-functioning economy, and this is a transformative piece of legislation which will promote both of these things. The bill establishes an economy-wide framework to enable customers to get more value out of their data, and in doing so, I expect it will improve the lives of consumers and allow for new and improved offerings from people such as fintechs. MB are consulting on how the bill could be applied to the banking and electricity sectors. I encourage you to have your say in both of these matters. Industry have been integral to the development of this bill, and it's important we continue to hear from you in order to realise the benefits of this work. The last thing I want to talk about is the work I'm doing to update our company's law, which has not been substantially updated or reviewed since it came into force 30 years ago. Some of you will remember that from when you were at university. This work is fundamentally about improving the fairness and ease of doing business, helping to deter poor and illegal business practices and reducing the burden of compliance. It is an ambitious package of reforms that includes 4 key elements. The first one is about modernising, digitising and simplifying the Act. For example, simple things like allowing firms to put their annual reports up online without having to post them to shareholders is a classic piece of digitising the Act. Allowing companies to more easily implement changes in their share structure, such as issuing bonus shares or cancelling shares, where there's no change in the effective rights of the shareholders, should be able to occur more easily, and that's part of modernising the legislation. The second part is the intention to remove directors' personal addresses from the company register. There are legitimate concerns from directors about having to disclose their home addresses. The proposed reforms will comprehensively deal with this by removing the requirement for both directors and shareholders, because in many cases directors are the shareholders in private companies, to publish their personal addresses on the company's register, but they will be required to put up a service address so that they can, for example, be served papers. To ensure there is adequate transparency and that we can also track directors, they will be assigned a unique ID number. This is important, especially when it comes to the matter of phoenixing of companies, which is the practice of abandoning a company and leaving behind debts only to set up a new company with a slightly different name and continuing to operate. Currently, it's hard to track this kind of activity. For instance, and I did check this, if you go to the company's office and type in John Smith, there's about 27, 28 pages of John Smith listed as company directors on the company's register. Third, we are changing and updating the insolvency legislation to better protect creditors. An example of better protecting creditors is about extending the clawback period for related party transactions once a business has gone into receivership or liquidation. And, for example, specifying that holiday pay of an employee is an amount that should be included when liquidation of a company occurs. The fourth element is about encouraging the use of New Zealand business number. And the reason I'm keen to do that is that we are promoting at government level e-invoicing, and it will also assist in verifying companies for AML purposes and to fight scams. Separately, but relatedly, I'm grateful that Justice Minister Paul Goldsmith has agreed for the Law Commission to undertake a review of director duties and liabilities. At present, the lack of clarity around this is deterring people from becoming company directors. To grow the economy, we need experienced, knowledgeable people like Rob down here who are willing to go on company boards and help them to excel. Finally, I just want to briefly mention that the Financial Markets Authority is clearly integral to the success of all this work. My objective is to ensure we have a focus on stimulating the financial markets and creating opportunities for competition, while at the same time making sure regulations and oversight are fit for purpose. I'm delighted that Craig Stobo has recently taken up the position of Chair of the Financial Markets Authority, and I will announce later this week 3 new appointments to the board who will bring industry-wide experience and pragmatic approach to their roles. I could keep going on, there's more I'm doing, but I think that's enough and you've got to have your dinner. But you probably realise I'm deeply motivated and am setting an ambitious pace. Ambi tell me that they're tapped out. I don't believe them, because reform is long overdue, and you only have a moment in time. But suffice to say, this is an exciting time for the financial services providers, and I look forward to seeing what these improvements will mean for your industry. New Zealand's economy and Kiwi households up and down the country will hopefully all in time benefit from this. Thank you for all your help and understanding as we continue to cut through the red tape and allow for more innovation, productivity and competition. And thank you once again for having me here today, and I look forward to working with you all in the future. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Kia ora koutou katoa. Good evening and welcome everyone. Minister, on behalf of the FSC, I'd like to thank you for your address this evening and your support for this event, going back previous years. As you've covered tonight, there's a dizzying amount happening in your portfolio at the moment. I think we're all struggling to process everything that you've mentioned this evening. Capital markets changes, triple CFA, conduct, KiwiSaver work, changes to the Companies Act. It's a really significant change agenda, and we acknowledge your passion for removing red tape and creating a vibrant and healthy financial sector. The long-term nature of health and life insurance and superannuation means that policy settings are really critical to delivering successful outcomes for New Zealanders and New Zealand. And these good policy settings require strong engagement, strong, robust engagement between policymakers, regulators and the industry. And we really acknowledge and appreciate your willingness to engage with the industry since you've been in office. At FSC, we think we're a credible and committed partner. We are a credible and committed partner in this process. We've got over 113 members managing funds of more than $100 billion, paying claims of over $3 billion, and we're the voice of the sector. Our vision is to grow the confidence and well-being of New Zealanders, which I think is highly aligned with the government's objectives. We're committed to playing our part, working with you to help ensure successful outcomes for New Zealanders and New Zealand. Please join me in thanking Minister Bailey.
Thank you.